All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to talk about hacking your brain. We're going to look at a really powerful mental model that explains why sometimes you just feel completely overwhelmed. And more importantly, how you can learn pretty much anything more effectively. We are talking about cognitive load theory.
You ever have one of those moments where your brain just feels full? Like you literally cannot absorb one more piece of information? Think about it this way. Reheating last night's dinner is basically automatic, right? You don't even think about it. But trying to cook a brand new complex recipe, suddenly you're juggling steps, ingredients, timers. It feels like your brain is running a marathon. This simple idea really gets to the heart of what we're going to break down today. So, what is going on there? What's actually happening when your brain feels maxed out? Well, there's a name for that feeling and a whole science behind it. So, let's dive into our first section and officially meet cognitive load theory. Okay, before we can get to cognitive load, we have to talk about something called working memory. The best way to think about it is like a little temporary notepad in your brain. It's the space where you're actively juggling new ideas and processing information. And this is the absolute key, that notepad is tiny. It has a very, very limited capacity. And when that notepad is full, well, it's full. So if your working memory is that little notepad, then cognitive load theory is kind of like the instruction manual for it. It's the whole framework that explains how we use up that limited mental space, and crucially, how we can use it a heck of a lot more efficiently so we can learn things better and faster.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. It turns out that not all of this load on your brain is the same. The mental effort you're putting in actually comes from a few different places. So in this next section, we're going to figure out exactly what's taking up all that precious brain space. That's right. It's not just one big thing weighing you down. Your attention is constantly getting pulled in different directions by three distinct types of cognitive load, all competing with each other.
Okay, check out this chart. This is what a really bad learning situation looks like. See that huge purple slice? 75%. That's something called extraneous load. Think of it as wasted energy. Brain power that's being spent on stuff that doesn't actually help you learn, like a confusing website layout or a bunch of unnecessary jargon. Your brain is working hard, for sure, but on all the wrong things.
Now, let's flip it. This is the goal. This is what we're aiming for. In a good learning scenario, that extraneous load, all the junk, is tiny. And that frees up all your mental resources to focus on what actually matters, the intrinsic load, which is the task itself. This is what real effective learning feels like. Your brain power is focused, not just spinning its wheels.
So let's put some names to these things. First up is intrinsic load. This is just the built-in, non-negotiable difficulty of the topic itself. Going back to our analogy, a 10-step paella recipe is just naturally more complex than reheating soup. You can't really change that core difficulty.
Next up is extraneous load, and this is the villain of our story. This is the bad load that we want to get rid of. It's all the stuff that just gets in the way. In the kitchen, it's the recipe that's badly written, the spice jars that aren't labeled, the kids screaming in the background. It's all the mental clutter that distracts you from actually cooking. And finally, there's germane load. Now this one's a little different, and it's a really key point. It's not another type of load that gets added on. Instead, it's just a measure of how well your brain is actually focused on and processing the good stuff, that intrinsic load. So the goal, the whole point of all this, is to reduce the bad extraneous load so you can free up brain space and maximize your germane load. Okay, so we figured out that some tasks just have a higher intrinsic load. They're just harder. But why? What is it about some subjects that makes them so much tougher for our brains to handle? Well, that brings us to our next section, and it all comes down to one word: interactivity.
The big idea here is something called element interactivity, and that's just a fancy term for how many different bits of information you have to hold in your head at the exact same time for any of it to make sense. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you have learning French words. That has low interactivity. You can learn the word for cat, chat, without knowing anything about the word for dog, chien. They're separate ideas. But on the right, look at that simple math equation. To get it, you have to understand what y, m, x, and b all mean and how they relate to each other all at once. The elements are all interacting. And the person who came up with this whole theory, John Sweller, he just nails it right here. The more things you have to juggle in your head at once, the more of that limited working memory you use up. That right there is what a high intrinsic load actually is. It's why some things just feel so much harder to learn. So this is all pretty cool theory, right?
But what are we supposed to do with it? How do we actually tackle those tough, high interactivity tasks without our brains just giving up? Let's get into our final section and see how we can turn all this theory into a real practical strategy. So here it is, the secret weapon we have against that high intrinsic load. And get this, it's not about having a bigger brain or more willpower. It's actually much simpler. It's all about building up your background knowledge. And here's exactly how that works. Experts use a mental trick called chunking. So a brand new reader looks at this sentence and has to process 6 separate things, 6 different words. The cat sat, that takes up a lot of mental space. But an expert reader, someone with years of background knowledge in reading, they just see one single thing, the whole idea.
And that right there is the magic of expertise. By grouping lots of little ideas into one big chunk, you're actually reducing the number of things your brain has to juggle at one time. And that frees up a massive amount of your working memory, which is why experts can make really complex things look so easy. So let's just boil this all down. What are the big things to remember? First, your working memory is precious and limited. There's the intrinsic load, the core difficulty, and the extraneous load, the junk you need to get rid of. The reason some tasks are harder is because of high element interactivity, and the ultimate cheat code to deal with that is building knowledge so you can chunk it all together. So, I'll leave you with this final thought, because this isn't just some abstract idea, right? It's a real tool you can use. So think about it. Where in your life right now are you dealing with a ton of unnecessary extraneous load? At your job? In school? Even in a hobby you're trying to learn? What's one small thing you can do to clear out some of that clutter and free up your brain to focus on what actually matters?